Tonight on Reel to Reel, we'll visit the makers of a quilt for peace.
We'll travel to Fort Dix, New Jersey to meet some priests in uniform.
Mike Gallagher will be along to talk about new movies, including Amadeus and the Razor's Edge.
Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons returns to talk about trust.
And in Youth Profiles, we'll highlight Philadelphia student Chris Hilden. Hello, I'm Isabel Garvey-LaGrosse.
And I'm Father Dave McGowan. Welcome to Reel to Reel.
Recently, the name of John F. Kennedy has been frequently invoked. Famous as president, he was also the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Profiles in Courage.
It's in memory of that tradition that tonight we'd like to profile a 14-year-old freshman from Cardinal O'Hara High School in Springfield, Delaware County, Pennsylvania. Honor student and altar boy, Chris Hilden is a Catholic youth who's an example of courage to us all.
The qualities that I think best describe Chris is his perseverance and his generally positive outlook on life.
He's very courageous. He doesn't let things bother him. He's outgoing, tries to be independent, and he's a fighter.
Perseverance, courage, and independence, all qualities that make Chris Hilden an extraordinary young man. But there's one thing that makes Chris stand out. He is legally blind.
Christopher's visual impairments began when he was about 4 years old as a result of an illness. He had encephalitis. He was sick for about 2 weeks, I guess, in the hospital. When he had a very high fever at the time, and when he woke up, he had lost his eyesight. It continued, I suppose, for a good month to 6 weeks, and gradually a little bit has come back. And that is what he has today. And of course, in the beginning, we were very heartsick, but when we realized this was it, just put your faith in God and hope for the best.
When Chris was in the hospital ill, and of course the other children wanted to know what was wrong with him, and to the extent possible, we tried to explain to him that he was sick and that he would get better, but when he came home, that he might not be able to see, and that we would just have to help Chris as much as possible, but that we shouldn't show him any extra special attention so that he would feel as though he was different from the others.
My brothers and sisters and me really don't treat him any differently at all. We help him when he needs help, but other than that, he just fits in like everybody else.
Another way Chris is able to express his independence and his ability is through bowling on Cardinal O'Hara's intramural bowling team.
Well, when I'm bowling, I usually see like a white sheet across the bottom of the alley. There is some difficulty involved because I can't make out individual pins, so I had to bowl towards the center of the sheet.
Even though he's a high school freshman, Chris continues to serve his parish as an altar boy.
I'm an altar boy for St. Anastasia's Parish, and I've been serving for 4 years. When I first became an altar boy, the only problem I had was probably distinguishing wine from water.
Dedicated altar boy, competitive bowler, honor student. These activities are possible because of perseverance, courage, and independence, but perhaps Chris' most extraordinary trait is his acceptance.
No, I don't think there's ever been a time when I asked God why it's me. I just accept it as it is.
I would say his attitude is 100% positive. There isn't anything he thinks he can't do, although we've told him there's maybe 2 things that we can think of that he can't, and one is drive and the other is play hard baseball. But outside of that, Chris thinks he's invincible.
Many people put the responsibility for world peace into the hands of government officials. Others feel that every little effort helps. With that in mind, we're going to travel to San Francisco to visit a group who have quite literally taken matters into their own hands.
Years ago, I was feeling so troubled about world peace. It really felt like somebody was going to push the button, and it just seemed like nuclear war was inevitable, even if it was only by accident. And I kept wondering, what can I do? I'm only one person.
2 years ago, a textile artist and a Zen Buddhist priest jokingly proposed making a quilt with which to wrap up the MX missiles and put them to sleep. From that idea would emerge the San Francisco Peace Quilt Project.
I read an article about a quilt the people in Boise, Idaho had made and had sent to the Soviet Union. And I love to work with textiles and I love to sew, and it seemed like a positive gesture toward peace.
In the spirit of old-fashioned quilting bees, Mimi Manning of San Francisco gathered a small group of friends to help create a quilt which they could give to the people of the Soviet Union as a message of friendship.
I hope this quilt continues the kind of prayerful thought that has gone into it, that our spirituality actually transcends the oceans of diversity and the oceans of animosity and misunderstandings, that we are all people on this same planet.
We didn't require that people be expert quilters. And so if you look at the quilt, it's not perfect. But we did, before we quilted each session, we would, if somebody wanted help, we had these little practice squares, and we would give them lessons on how to knot the thread and how to put the beeswax on the thread and how to actually manipulate the needle through the 3 different layers of fabric.
Friends invited more friends, and before it was finished, over 100 people had helped with the quilt.
We don't mind that it's not perfect, and we feel that what's important is people's intention and their interest in working on the project. And the quilt's dirty, and it's got blood on it where people have pricked their fingers, but it looks real, and that's important.
Every decision about the quilt, from its colors to its destination, was made by the consensus of the entire group, a formality which gave the quilters a new perspective on peacemaking skills.
And it gives me a great appreciation for what will be required of world peace. I mean, if we have a hard time with someone that we even like, you know, who's our friend, who's the same race and same cultural, economic background as us, if we can have horrible fights, it's, you know, no wonder that there's, you know, we're on the brink of nuclear war. But on the other hand, what I feel the message is with this is that people can learn peacemaking right at home.
There are 8 center sections, and each one of those has a name, and each one of those was worked on at least by one person in the design group. This section, which is the infant and the old man with a yarmulke, that section is called Shalom. This section, these 4 figures, is called the family. These are the dancers. These are the embrace. This is continuum. This is a Slav word, troika, which means trinity, 3-wheel cart, 3-horse cart, or just 3. This figure here is called Gaia, Earth Goddess or Earth Mother. This last section is called Amy or Ami, which means friend, and out of her hand are coming the flowers that then go into the flower border to frame the whole quilt.
The original group of designers will personally carry the peace quilt throughout the Soviet Union this fall. The quilt will be given to the people of Leningrad, hopefully encouraging future exchanges in the name of peace.
Whether it's by bold demonstration or symbolic acts, peace is something for which we should all be working.
And when we return, we'll be meeting 2 priests who are working for peace in a most distinctive way. Stay with us. The most familiar image of the priesthood is that of the parish priest. But there's another style of priest evident in our world, and that's the hyphenated priest. We meet him as the priest teacher, priest counselor, priest editor,
Priest television star.
and priest television star.
Tonight we're going to travel to Fort Dix to see another example of the hyphenated priesthood, the priest soldier. In this story, we'll ask the question, what comes first, the sword or the cross?
Oh, I don't want to be here anymore. Gee-mama, want to go, but they won't let me go. Gee-mama, want to go. Hey!
Almighty and eternal God, on this very special day, we ask your blessing upon these soldiers who will graduate. Keep them safe. Keep them spiritually alive. Keep them morally awake. We also ask your blessing upon their parents and friends who have gathered here. We ask your blessing upon our country.
This is Fort Dix. Here every week, over 1,000 young men and women from around the country graduate from basic training to become combat-ready soldiers in the United States Army. Located in Pemberton, New Jersey, Fort Dix is the first stop for thousands of men and women on their way to at least 2 years' service in the military. But it's a long, hard road to this graduation ceremony.
Coming in, attention,
Warriors!
extend to the left,
Basic training for these recruits consists of 2 grueling months of mental and physical conditioning. In 8 weeks, drill sergeants will push these future soldiers harder than they've ever been pushed before.
What is Fort Dix here for? Why is Fort Dix here? To produce soldiers. We have a product. The product is the brand new raw recruit who comes off the street, who is received in the reception station and who for 8 weeks is trained. The danger is that this product be considered a thing rather than a person.
This is Colonel Edmund Spitell. He is Chief of Chaplains at Fort Dix. He is Catholic priest. This is Captain Carl Kroll. He is responsible for the spiritual well-being of over 4,000 recruits. He is also a Catholic priest.
I'm dealing with basic training soldiers. I'm dealing with soldiers who are away from home, away from an environment which is safe, secure. And what I'm trying to teach them and get across to them is that they are still in an environment that's safe. All of these soldiers at one time are brand new, and they're afraid, they're scared.
Both of these men have answered their calling as priests in an unusual way. They have chosen to make their parish the United States Army. Father Spitell is a native of Philadelphia. He has served his country in battle twice, first as an infantryman in World War II, and again in 1967 as a chaplain in the Vietnam War. Father Spitell was appointed as post chaplain to Fort Dix in 1982. His job here is twofold. As a parish priest, he serves both military and non-military families in the Fort Dix area. As the Chief of Chaplains, he is in charge of 19 military chaplains assigned to the Army base. It is Father Spitell's responsibility to ensure that the thousands of raw recruits passing through Fort Dix are treated as human beings and not assembly line robots.
The hardest thing to provide for the recruit, I or we the chaplains can't do. We can just encourage those who are more directly involved on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour basis with them, that they are real important individual persons. And do we get this across? We try very hard. My hope is that we do. We don't always.
Father Carl Kroll is one of 4 Catholic priests assigned to the base. The remainder of the staff consists of 14 Protestant ministers and 1 rabbi. It is the duty of a military chaplain to go out to the soldier, whether that soldier be in the line of fire or in line for chow. The military chaplain is there to practice a ministry of presence.
When I look at ministry of presence, what we learned in the chaplain basic course about it is the chaplain's presence with soldiers during the training part and during the field part of their existence in the Army. So I want to spend time with these soldiers. I want to care with them. I want to cry with them. I want to laugh with them. In basic training, it means I touch base with them at the key parts of their training experience. When they're making road marches, I'll make road marches with them. When we are bivouacked out there, I'll bivouac out with them. And in that way, I'm not a stranger coming, I'm their chaplain who cares for them. Let us now stand and let us pray together that very beautiful prayer our Lord has given us as we pray. Our Father. I think the Mass does something very important for the trainees. As I said, an awful lot of these soldiers have not been in Mass for a period of time. And I think what the sacrament does is it gets the soldier in touch with himself.
But how does a Catholic priest justify working for the military?
It has not been a problem. By the First Amendment, they're entitled to the exercise of their religion. My presence with these military people, and it's just an extension, an opportunity for them to exercise this religious freedom.
I am primarily and always a Catholic priest. If I ever reach the point where I put this side of the collar, or I want to be a major over a priesthood, or a colonel over being a priest, then I'm getting out. Because if I don't, then I have lost the most important thing in my life, and that is the priesthood.
We're going to break away, but when we return, Mike Gallagher will tell us about some new movies, including The Razor's Edge and Amadeus.
And Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons will join us to talk about trust. So stay with us. When was the last time that someone said to you, "Trust me"? Did you? Well, tonight, Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons will tell us why we're afraid to trust and how we can overcome that fear.
I've been told that Pope John the 23rd, before going to bed at night, said, "God, this is your church. I'm going to bed now. Take care of it. Good night." I'm certain that in that act, the Pope significantly diminished his worry and anxiety. Worry, anxiety, and fear are other major obstacles in loving relationships. Now, worry and fear can be overcome through growth in trust. And each one of us, you and I, both need to trust and to grow in trust every day. Trust is the foundation for all loving relationships. Without trust, it is not possible to love or to receive love. With mistrust, we put walls around our hearts or grids over our hearts. This mistrust limits our loving and limits our ability to receive love. This is really dangerous because the major way in which stress is reduced in our lives is through the ability to receive love, to be restored and to be refreshed in love. Now, many people are not aware that they have a problem with trust because their trust was damaged at an early age and they weren't consciously aware that this happened. The causes of mistrust include emotional experiences in childhood where parents were not as sensitive to a person as they really wanted them to be. Another major factor is the loss of a loved one in childhood, When you lose a loved one in childhood, walls go up without you realizing it, and you become afraid to love that way again. Today, divorce is a major cause of fear and mistrust in people. As a psychiatrist, I have seen more people recover their physical health through growth and trust than I saw when I was a general practitioner. Now, there are several steps that you can take to improve your capacity for trust. The first is to daily try to trust and commit yourself to the people you live with. If you're saying to me you can't do that because they're very difficult, I would suggest to you that you ask God to help you trust those people every day, because that's essential to your loving and to your health. Secondly, try to forgive the people who are not as loving as you wanted them to be, and this may involve going over stages of your life and being more honest about loving relationships. And then finally, trying to be thankful that you are a lovable person and will be protected in loving relationships. This is Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons.
Dr. Fitzgibbons will be back with us in a few weeks. Right now, here's Mike Gallagher to talk to us about the movies.
Hello, I'm Mike Gallagher. They said that Peter Shaffer's Amadeus couldn't be made into a movie, and they were wrong. Had they said it shouldn't be made into a movie, they would have been right. It was Tallulah Bankhead who came up with the immortal line that best sums up the kind of plays that Schaffer writes. There's less here than meets the eye. Salieri was a musical hack who was court composer to Habsburg Emperor Joseph II. According to Schaffer, he was the one man in Vienna to fully recognize the talent of Mozart. As a pious youth, Salieri had prayed to God for success as a musician, and God had answered his prayer. But then God, in a nasty mood presumably, had sent Mozart to show Salieri what he really could do when he set his mind to it. Salieri takes it personal, needless to say, that God should put such a divine gift into a japey and obscene child. And so he turns against God and sets out to destroy Mozart. This is a clever concept, maybe, but Schaffer is unable to make us believe it. The anti-God fulminations are absurd rather than chilling. Salieri is a windy bore, and the role of Mozart as written scarcely exists. Yes, the music is great, of course, but I suggest you listen to Mozart at a concert or on your stereo, and not filter to the lucubrations of Peter Schaffer. Next, more pretension. The Razor's Edge means to be about one man's search for nothing less than the meaning of life. But philosophical and religious ideas, even the by no means daunting ones of Somerset Maugham, are too much for Bill Murray, the star and co-author of the screenplay. As a result, the movie, instead of setting out into the deep, stays bound to the more congenial shallows of travelogue and period color. Only the vibrant Teresa Russell breathes a bit of life into it as a woman overcome by tragedy. Finally, we have two graphically sexual films, Brian De Palma's Body Double and Ken Russell's Crimes of Passion. It's a case of Russell at his worst and De Palma at his best, and Russell wins hands down. The important thing to understand about the mind of Brian De Palma, I'm not being personal now, heaven forfend, but I'm speaking of the man as revealed in his work, is that it is a perverse little mind, and both adjectives are important. Unlike Ken Russell, who cares about ideas, De Palma is a voyeur who has no ideas, save for those muddled impressions gained not from life as lived, but from watching other people's movies. Thus, De Palma's latest effort about an out-of-work actor who, through indulgence in voyeurism, becomes involved in a murder, is beneath both contempt and the level of serious discussion. Russell's flamboyant film, on the other hand, about a triangle involving an obsessed minister, a prostitute who leads a double life, and a sexually frustrated married man, is an honorable failure, whose excesses one can but regret. Well, I'm sorry the news wasn't so good this time, but next time, believe it or not, I'm going to take a look at two good films, Places in the Heart and Country. So join me then. I'm Mike Gallagher for Arts Review.
Finally, today is Veterans Day, and we're called to remember those who have died, those who have served, and even those who tonight are serving around the world.
And we can do them no greater honor than to do all we can to further the cause of peace.
And remember to drop us a line and let us know what you think of Reel to Reel. Send your comments and suggestions to Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA 19103.
Next week on Reel to Reel, we'll have a special interview with Mother Teresa of Calcutta.
Rosemary Bruno will keep us in the know, and we'll take a few minutes to reflect on the meaning of Thanksgiving.
It's been a pleasure spending this half hour with you this evening, and we hope to see you again next week. Good night.
Good night. And remember, Jesus is Lord.